December 20th, 1934, 5:47 in the morning. The snow was 3 days old, crusted hard enough to hold a man's weight until it didn't. Wind came through the barn cracks, carrying the smell of hay and horse sweat and something else. The iron scent of cold that meant the thermometer had dropped past carrying. Ben Ashford made it halfway to the barn before his legs quit. Face down in the snow, breath coming in short gasps that burned his lungs. The morning feed bell hung silent on its post. First time in 28 years it hadn't rung at dawn. Inside the barn, 12 horses called out sharp with hunger. Their voices carried across the frozen ground, desperate and wrong. His hand reached toward the barn door. Fingers clawed at frozen dirt. Body wouldn't answer. On the kitchen table behind him, a paper waited. Foreclosure notice dated December 18th. 90 days to pay $1,847. In 1934, that wasn't debt, that was doom. Through the barn door, she would see him, motionless in the snow. Vera Hollis heard them first, the horses. Their cries carried across the half-mile between the road and Ben Ashford's ranch, high and frantic in the still morning air. She'd been heading to town, her wagon loaded with empty feed sacks to return, flour to buy, errands that couldn't wait even 3 days before Christmas. But no smoke rose from Ben's chimney. No lamplight showed in the windows. And those horses, they sounded like they hadn't been fed since yesterday, maybe longer. She pulled the reins hard. Her wagon turned, wheels crunching through snow toward the ranch. The sound of her own heartbeat filled her ears. When she reached the yard, she saw him, a dark shape between the house and barn, motionless against white ground. For one terrible moment she thought he was dead. Then his fingers moved, barely, clawing at frozen earth. Vera jumped from the wagon and ran. Her boots broke through the snow crust, cold biting through her wool stockings. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressed her fingers to his throat. His pulse beat weak but steady beneath skin that burned hot as forge metal. "Mr. Ashford, Ben." She shook his shoulder. No response. His eyes were closed, breath coming shallow and quick. The smell of sickness rose from him, fever sweat and something sour in his lungs. She was 46 years old and weighed maybe 130 pounds. Ben Ashford was solid ranch muscle, probably close to 190. Getting him to the house would be like dragging a bull calf through mud. But she hooked her arms under his shoulders and pulled. The snow helped some. His body slid across the frozen crust, heels dragging twin tracks. 20 feet felt like 100. Her back screamed. Her breath came in white clouds. She got him to the porch steps, then had to half carry, half drag him up each one. The door was unlocked. She pulled him inside, onto the cold wooden floor. The stove had gone out. The room was barely warmer than outside. Vera ran to the wood box, started rebuilding the fire with shaking hands. Kindling first, then split logs, then she stood over it, willing it to catch. The smell of pine smoke filled the room. She got blankets from the bed, piled them over Ben where he lay. His skin still burned. She needed Doc Ramsey. The ranch was 6 miles from town. Her horse was already tired from the morning drive. Vera looked at Ben's face. His lips had gone pale. She made her decision. The ride to town took 20 minutes, pushing her horse harder than she should have. She found Doc Ramsey at his office, preparing for morning rounds. He was 60-something, with steady hands and eyes that had seen most ways a body could fail. "Ben Ashford's down," Vera said before he could speak. "Fever, can't stand. Been on the floor since sometime last night." Doc grabbed his bag. They took his buggy, faster than her wagon. The horses threw up snow behind them as they raced back toward the ranch. Ben hadn't moved. Doc knelt beside him, opened his bag with practiced efficiency, thermometer first. Then he pressed his ear to Ben's chest, listening to the wet sound of his breathing. His fingers checked pulse points, pulled back eyelids, tested reflexes. "Pneumonia," Doc said finally, starting in both lungs. Another night out here, and he'd be past saving. He looked at Vera. 3 months minimum before he can work again. Maybe longer. Vera's eyes went to the kitchen table. The paper sat there in plain view, corners held down by a coffee cup. Doc followed her gaze. He walked over, picked it up, read it. "Foreclosure notice," he said quietly. "March 15th. He set the paper back down. The coffee cup rattled against the wood. 90 days. Vera did the math in her head. December 20th to March 15th. 85 days, give or take. Doc just said 3 months recovery. That was closer to 90 days. Doc looked at her. His expression said what his mouth didn't need to. Ben Ashford wouldn't be working his ranch by March, wouldn't be earning money, wouldn't be paying any debt. "He won't make it in time," Vera said. Doc closed his bag. "No, he won't." 2 days later, Tommy Ashford arrived. December 22nd, late morning, driving a Ford Model A that looked too clean for ranch country. He was 24, Ben's sister's boy, wearing a wool coat that still had store creases and boots that had never seen real mud. Vera was in the barn when she heard the engine. She'd been there since dawn, feeding horses, filling water troughs from the pump. Her hands ached from the cold. The smell of hay and leather and animal warmth surrounded her, familiar and honest. Tommy knocked on the house door, then let himself in without waiting. By the time Vera walked from the barn, he was already inside. She could hear voices. Tommy's smooth and concerned, Ben's weak and confused. She entered through the kitchen. Tommy stood over Ben's bed, one hand on his uncle's shoulder. Ben lay propped against pillows, eyes glassy with fever. Doc had been by that morning, said the pneumonia was holding steady but not improving. 3 weeks minimum before Ben could think clearly, let alone stand. "Mrs. Hollis," Tommy said, turning. His smile was easy, practiced. "Didn't know Uncle Ben had help. That's a mercy. Someone had to feed the horses." Vera set down the milk pail she'd brought from the barn. "You're Tommy." Yes, ma'am. Came soon as I heard." He gestured at Ben. "Poor Uncle Ben, lying here helpless. Figured I should check on things. Help with the ranch business while he recovers." Something in his voice made Vera's shoulders tighten. The way he said helpless, and the way his eyes had already scanned the room, noting the deed certificate on the shelf, the foreclosure notice still on the table. "Ranch business is just feeding stock right now," Vera said. "Everything else can wait." "Well, sure, but there's paperwork, bills, legal matters." Tommy pulled a chair close to Ben's bed, sat down like he belonged there. "Uncle Ben and I should discuss a few things. Family business." Vera wanted to stay. Wanted to plant herself between Tommy and whatever legal matters he had in mind, but she had no claim here. She was the neighbor woman feeding horses out of mercy, nothing more. "I'll be in the barn," she said. "Holler if you need anything." She left, but slowly, stood on the porch for a moment, listening. Tommy's voice drifted through the door, low and soothing. Ben's responses came scattered, confused, fever talk. Vera forced herself to walk back to the barn. The horses needed hay. Work didn't stop for suspicion. Inside, Tommy waited until the barn door closed. Then he pulled papers from his coat. Quit claim deed. He'd had it drawn up in town yesterday, paid a clerk $5 to prepare it proper. All it needed was a signature. Ben's eyes tracked movement but didn't focus. His lips moved, forming words that didn't quite connect. "Sarah, horses need, can't let them." That's right, Uncle Ben. Can't let things fall apart." Tommy unfolded the deed, smoothed it on the bedside table. The paper crackled in the quiet room. Outside, wind rattled the window glass. He uncapped a pen, put it in Ben's right hand. Ben's fingers closed around it weakly, the way a child holds something unfamiliar. "Just need you to sign here," Tommy said. "Transfer some property details. Make things easier while you're recovering." Ben's hand moved, guided by Tommy's grip. The pen touched paper, made a mark that might have been a letter. Ben's hand went slack. Tommy pulled the pen away, looked at the signature. Barely legible. But he'd practiced Ben's hand for weeks. He dipped the pen again, steadied it with his left hand, his writing hand, and traced over Ben's mark, made it clearer. Added the parts Ben's fever-weak grip had missed. The signature slanted left. Just slightly. Ben Ashford was right-handed, always had been, but fever made men shake, made their grip uncertain. Who would question a sick man's unsteady writing? Tommy blew on the ink to dry it. The smell was sharp, chemical. He folded the deed, slipped it back into his coat. 70 acres of ranch land, transferred for the sum of $500. The bank would call it legitimate. Curtis Brennan had already agreed. They'd split the profit when the railroad came through next year. $8,000 for right-of-way. Tommy's cut would be $2,000. He patted Ben's shoulder. "You rest now, Uncle Ben. I'll take care of everything." Ben's eyes had closed. His breathing settled into the rough rhythm of fever sleep. On the table, the coffee cup sat empty. Tommy picked it up, carried it to the kitchen, washed it in the basin, dried it, put it back. No trace of what had just happened except a folded paper in his coat and a signature that would hold up in any county office. Through the window, he could see Vera in the barn. Her back to the house, pitchfork in hand, moving hay. Good. Let her play nursemaid to the horses. By the time anyone understood what had changed, the deed would be filed and recorded. Tommy put on his hat, buttoned his coat. He walked to the door, paused, looked back at his uncle. For a moment, something flickered in his face. Not quite guilt. Maybe its distant cousin. Then it was gone. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of snow and pine and the far-off promise of more weather coming. Tommy pulled the door shut behind him, walked to his Ford, started the engine. The sound rattled across the frozen yard. Vera looked up from the barn, watched him drive away. His taillights disappeared down the road toward town. She stood there, pitchfork in hand, a cold knot forming in her stomach. Something about that visit felt wrong. The way Tommy had smiled, the way he'd insisted on family business, the way he'd left without checking on the horses, without asking what needed doing, without offering to help. Ben's nephew had driven 6 miles in December cold, stayed 20 minutes, and left. Inside the house Ben slept on, the deed certificate still sat on its shelf. But in Tommy's coat pocket, another deed rode toward the county clerk's office. One that would be filed and stamped and recorded before Ben Ashford ever knew what his own hand had signed. By morning, the ranch would belong to someone else. Ben didn't know yet. December 23rd, Vera arrived at dawn, same as she would for the next 83 days. The morning star still showed above the eastern ridge, her breath clouded white in the cold. The smell of wood smoke drifted from distant cabins, other families preparing for Christmas morning. Ben Ashford's chimney showed smoke now. She'd made sure of that yesterday before leaving, but the barn was dark, silent, waiting. She unhitched her horse, led it to the small paddock, then walked to the barn. The door swung open with a creak that scattered the stillness. Inside, 12 horses turned their heads toward her. Their eyes caught the lantern light she carried. Recognition came quick. These animals knew hunger, knew the sound of salvation arriving late. "All right," Vera said quietly. "Let's get you fed." She worked methodically. Hay first, 2 flakes per horse, distributed in feeding troughs along the stalls. The smell of dried grass and timothy filled the air, sweet and dusty. Then grain. A coffee can measure, for each animal, poured into individual buckets. The sound of grain hitting metal made a rhythm. Pour, scatter, pour, scatter. The horses pushed forward, eager. Water came last. The pump outside was frozen. She had to work the handle 50 times before it gave up anything liquid. Her hands went numb inside her gloves. Ice formed at the pump's base where water splashed. She filled bucket after bucket, carried them to the troughs inside. Her back remembered yesterday's work, reminded her she wasn't 20 anymore. When the feeding was done, she stood in the barn doorway, watched the horses eat. Their contentment was almost visible. The way their heads dropped, the sound of chewing, the occasional satisfied snort. A well-fed horse was proof of something. She wasn't sure what yet, just knew it mattered. Before she left, Vera pulled a small ledger from her coat pocket. Brown leather cover, pages she'd stitched herself. She'd brought it from her feed store. Used it to track credit accounts, debts owed, promises made in hard times. She opened to the first page. Wrote in careful script, Ben Ashford, feed account, deck 23, 934, day 3, since collapse. 12 horses, hay, 24 flakes at 12C, id2U. 88, grain, 12 measures at 4C, 48C, daily, total, 336. She did the math below. Her store carried about $70 in inventory. Her winter profit margin was maybe $230. If she was careful, if nothing went wrong, if customers paid their bills on time. $3.36 a day. Times 90 days until the foreclosure deadline, that was $302. More than her entire profit. More than she could afford to lose. Vera looked at the numbers. Then she looked at the horses, made her choice. She wrote, balance carried forward, 336, account open. The ledger went back in her pocket. She walked to the house to check on Ben. January 2nd arrived quiet and gray. Vera had been coming for 13 days. The rhythm was set now. Dawn feeding, check the house fire, change Ben's blankets when fever soaked them, evening feeding, home to her own cold cabin. Her feed store sat closed more than open. Customers stopped asking when she'd be back, started going to Hendrick's place 2 towns over. She entered the house that morning, expecting the same. Ben unconscious or delirious, muttering names of people long gone. But when she pushed open the door, his eyes were open, clear, tracking her movement. "Mrs. Hollis," he said. His voice was rough, unused, but the words connected. Made sense. Vera stopped, set down the milk pail she'd brought. "Mr. Ashford, you're awake? How long?" 2 weeks yesterday. December 20th, you went down. Ben tried to sit up, made it about 3 inches before his strength quit. He fell back against the pillows, breathing hard. The smell of clean linen surrounded him. She'd changed his bedding 2 days ago, washed the fever sweat out in the creek despite the cold. "The horses," he said, "fed twice daily. They're fine." His eyes went to the window. Through it, the barn stood solid in morning light. "You've been." Somebody had to. Ben's jaw worked. His hands gripped the blanket edge. She could see him trying to understand it. Why a woman he barely knew would show up every dawn for 2 weeks. Feed his stock, tend his fire, keep him from dying alone. "Doc Ramsey says 3 months before you can work," Vera continued. "Might as well get it all out. Maybe longer. Pneumonia in both lungs." 3 months, Ben's voice went flat. His eyes found the kitchen table. The foreclosure notice still sat there, corners curled now from 2 weeks of sitting. "March 15th. Yes. I won't make it." Vera pulled the chair close to his bed, sat down. The wood creaked under her weight. Outside, a crow called, harsh and distant. "Maybe not. But your horses will be fed until then. That's something." "Why?" The question came out raw. You don't know me. Don't owe me anything. Vera folded her hands in her lap. Her fingers had calluses now from 2 weeks of pitchfork work, rope handling, pump cranking. 4 years ago, my husband died. Heart gave out while he was fixing fence. I found him after dark. By the time I got help, he was gone. Ben waited, didn't interrupt. That winter, I nearly went under. Feed store was new, bills piled up. I was alone, didn't know if I could make it. She looked at her hands. Martha Doyle brought soup every Sunday. Ruth Barrett mended my fence without asking. Doc Brennan sat with me when the grief got bad. Wouldn't take payment. She raised her eyes to his. I kept trying to thank them, trying to figure out how to pay them back. Martha finally told me, "Child, you can't repay mercy backward. You can only pass it forward." So that's what I'm doing. Ben's throat worked. No words came out. Your horses needed feeding, Vera said simply. That's enough reason. She stood, moved to the stove, added wood. The fire crackled, catching new fuel. The smell of pine smoke filled the small room. When she turned back, Ben's eyes were closed. But his breathing had changed, steadier, less tight. Mrs. Hollis, he said without opening his eyes. Yes? Thank you. The words were small, insufficient. They both knew it. But they were all he had right then. Vera picked up the milk pail. You're welcome. Rest now. I'll be back for evening feeding. She left him there. Walked to the barn, updated her ledger. Day 13. Balance carried forward, 4368. Still climbing, still worth it. January 15th. Ben had been sitting up for 3 days now. Could make it from bed to chair if he moved slow. Doc said that was progress. Said another month before he could walk to the barn. 2 months before he could work. Curtis Brennan arrived mid-morning in a black Packard that looked like money. He was 48, bank manager for 12 years, wearing a suit that cost more than most men made in a season. The smell of bay rum cologne came through the door before he did. Vera was at the stove, making soup. She turned when Curtis knocked, saw him through the window. Her hands tightened on the ladle. Brennan, she said, opening the door but not stepping aside. Mrs. Hollis, Curtis touched his hat brim. Didn't expect to find you here. Someone has to cook. She didn't move. Made him ask. I need to speak with Ben. Bank business. He's still recovering. I'm aware. Curtis's smile was professional, empty. This won't take long. Vera stepped aside. Curtis entered, brushing past her. His shoes were polished leather, clean despite the January mud outside. He crossed to where Ben sat in the chair by the window, a blanket over his legs. Ben. Curtis pulled up a second chair, sat without being invited. You're looking better. What do you want, Curtis? Ben's voice was stronger now, but still carried the rasp of damaged lungs. Curtis pulled papers from his briefcase. The sound of rustling documents filled the room. Outside, a horse whinnied, one of Ben's, probably smelling feed time coming. I'm afraid there's been a change to your foreclosure timeline. Curtis set the papers on the small table between them. The deadline has been accelerated, February 28th, not March 15th. Vera's ladle clattered against the pot. Ben sat forward, the blanket sliding from his lap. That's 6 weeks from now. The original notice said March. The original timeline was predicated on current ownership. Curtis's finger tapped the top document. There's been a transfer. New owner requested acceleration of payment terms. Bank is obligated to comply. New owner. Ben's hands gripped the chair arms. What new owner? Curtis smiled. Your nephew, Tommy Ashford. He filed a quit claim deed January 7th. Purchased the property for $500, all legal and recorded at the county office. The room went silent, except for the tick of the clock on the mantel and the pop of wood in the stove. Ben stared at Curtis. His face had gone white. Tommy doesn't own this ranch. According to the deed transfer, he does. Curtis pulled another paper from the stack. Signed by you on December 22nd. Witnessed. Filed properly. That's impossible. I never... Ben stopped. December 22nd. He'd been out of his mind with fever. Couldn't remember most of that week. Just fragments. Tommy's voice. A pen in his hand. Papers he couldn't read. I want to see it, Ben said. The deed. Curtis hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Then he handed over the document. Ben took it with shaking hands. The paper trembled as he read. Legal language, dense and formal. But at the bottom, clear as daylight, a signature. Benjamin Ashford, dated December 22nd, 1934. He stared at it. The letters looked right. The shape was close. But something was wrong. He brought the paper closer to his face. The signature slanted left, just slightly, like it had been written by someone favoring their left hand. Ben Ashford was right-handed. Always had been. His signature slanted right. This isn't my handwriting, Ben said quietly. Curtis's expression didn't change. It's your signature. Your nephew witnessed it. You were under some distress from illness, perhaps. That would explain any irregularity. This isn't mine. Ben's voice rose. I never signed this. I never agreed to sell. You were delirious, Vera said from the stove. She'd moved closer, was looking over Ben's shoulder at the document. December 22nd? You couldn't form a sentence. Doc's diary would show that. Curtis stood, collected his papers with efficient movements. Delirium or not, the signature is legal. The deed is filed. The property now belongs to Tommy Ashford, and he's requested that the bank accelerate foreclosure to recover his investment. He snapped his briefcase shut. February 28th. That's 44 days. If the debt isn't paid, the bank forecloses and auctions the property. To you, Ben said. Tommy's selling to you. Curtis's smile was thin. The railroad is expanding through this valley next spring. Right-of-way purchases will begin in March. This property happens to sit on the most direct route. He moved toward the door. Business is business, Ben. Nothing personal. My nephew forged my signature while I was dying. Your nephew holds a legal deed. How he obtained it is between you and him. Curtis opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of manure and mud and January thaw. 44 days. Good afternoon. He left. The Packard's engine started, smooth and expensive. Gravel crunched under tires as he drove away. Ben sat holding the forged deed. His hands shook. Not from weakness now, from rage so deep it had no bottom. Vera came to his side, looked at the signature. Her finger traced the left slant letters. He guided your hand, made you sign while you couldn't think. I let him in. Ben's voice broke. Thought he was helping. Family. You were sick. I was stupid. Ben threw the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up, that wrong signature mocking him. 2 weeks. He waited 2 weeks, then stole everything while I couldn't fight back. He tried to stand. His legs buckled. Vera caught him, held him upright. For a moment they stood there, her shoulder under his arm, his weight sagging against her. 44 days, Ben whispered. I can't even walk to the barn. How am I supposed to fight this? Vera helped him back to the chair, retrieved the forged deed from the floor, studied it with eyes that had spent 4 years keeping books, tracking numbers, catching errors in credit accounts. We'll find a way, she said, but her voice carried doubt. And they both heard it. February 1st. Ben made it to the porch that morning. First time he'd been outside in 6 weeks. The cold hit his lungs like a fist, made him cough until his ribs ached. But he stood there, one hand on the rail post, and looked at his ranch. The barn needed paint. The fence line sagged in 2 places. Mud showed through the snow now, dark patches where the January thaw had started its work. His horses stood in the paddock, healthy and sleek. Vera's doing. Every bit of it. In his pocket, his father's watch ticked steady. Gold case, railroad grade, given to John Ashford in 1889 for 30 years of service to the Texas and Pacific. Ben had inherited it in 1906, carried it every day since. 28 years of mornings measured by its hands. The weight of it had become part of him. Familiar as his own heartbeat. He pulled it out now, opened the case. The face was white enamel, Roman numerals, second-hand sweeping smooth and quiet. On the inside of the case engraved, To John Ashford, time well spent, T&P Railway. Ben closed it. The snap echoed small and final. He hitched Vera's horse to her wagon. She'd left it for him to use if he needed. Drove 3 miles to Porter's Pawn and Trade on the edge of town. The shop smelled of old leather and gun oil, and other people's desperation. Glass cases lined the walls. Wedding rings, pistols, pocket watches by the dozen. Hiram Porter was 60, with eyes that had seen every kind of loss walk through his door. He took the watch from Ben's hand, examined it with a jeweler's loupe, turned it over, read the engraving. Railroad grade, Hiram said. Good movement. Case is solid gold, 14 karat. He set it on the scale. 3 ounces, give or take. Worth maybe $60 if I sold it right. What will you give me? Hiram looked at Ben. Saw the cough-thin frame, the hands that still shook slightly, the eyes that carried the look of a man counting days. $18. Ben's jaw tightened. That's highway robbery. That's pawn rates. You want to sell outright? I'll give you 30. But then it's gone for good. Ben stared at the watch on the counter. His father had wound it every morning for 30 years. Ben had done the same for 28. 9,500 mornings, give or take. All of them measured by the small gold circle. 18, Ben said. Pawn. Hiram wrote the ticket. Ben signed it. The watch disappeared into Hiram's safe with a metallic click that sounded like a door closing. Ben drove back to the ranch with $18 in his pocket and a lightness on his hip that felt like amputation. Vera arrived for evening feeding to find Ben at the kitchen table. The $18 sat in front of him in bills and coins. He divided it into small piles, trying to make it stretch, trying to make it matter against a debt of $1,847. What's this? Vera set down her feed bucket. Partial payment. Ben's voice was flat. $18 toward what I owe the bank. Thought maybe if I showed good faith. Where'd you get $18? Ben didn't answer. Just touched his vest pocket, the pocket that had carried his father's watch for 28 years. Now empty. Vera's face went soft, then hard. You pawned it? Needed the money. For what? $18 won't stop Curtis Brennan. She sat down across from him. Ben, that watch was your father's. And this ranch was his before that, and my grandfather's before him. 70 acres of Ashford land going back to 1867. His hand swept across the money. $18 is what I've got. It's something. Vera looked at the pathetic pile of cash. Then at Ben's face, saw the humiliation there. The desperate mathematics of a man trying to buy back his dignity with pocket change. She reached into her coat, pulled out her ledger, set it on the table beside his money, opened to the current page. Feb 1, 1935, day 43, daily feed, $3.36, running balance, $144. 48. Ben stared at the numbers. $144. That's what I've spent feeding your horses. 43 days at $3.36 each. Her finger traced down the column, every entry in careful script, every dollar accounted for. My winter inventory was $70. My profit margin was $230. I'm into my profit now. By March, I'll be into my operating capital. You'll lose your store. Maybe. Vera closed the ledger. But your horses will be fed. Ben pushed the $18 toward her. Take it. Toward the feed bill. No. Vera, no. She pushed the money back. You keep it. Pay Doc Ramsey what you owe him. Or save it for something that matters. I'm not keeping a ledger, so you can repay me. I'm keeping it so I remember why I'm doing this. Why are you? The question hung between them. Outside, the wind picked up, carried the smell of thawing earth and distant rain. February in Texas meant winter wasn't finished, but it was losing its grip. Mud season coming. The time between frozen and growing, Vera stood, picked up her feed bucket. Because 4 years ago, people fed me when I couldn't feed myself. Not with food, with time, with showing up, with not letting me fall alone. She moved toward the door. Your horses need feeding. That's reason enough. She left him sitting there with his $18 and his empty pocket and the weight of 43 days of mercy he couldn't repay. Ben listened to her footsteps cross the yard, heard the barn door open, the sound of grain pouring into buckets, horses nickering in recognition, the ordinary music of care given without condition. He put the $18 in his pocket, right where his father's watch used to ride. The bills and coins felt wrong there. Too light, too temporary. Through the window, lamplight glowed in the barn. Vera's silhouette moved among the horses, patient, steady, faithful as the watch he'd just sold. And for the first time since Tommy had forged that signature, Ben felt something other than rage. He felt the terrible, crushing weight of being seen, of being worth saving, of mattering to someone when he couldn't matter to himself. It was worse than the fever, harder than the pneumonia, and he had no idea what to do with it. February 15th. The feed store had been closed for 8 weeks. Vera opened it that morning because her inventory was nearly gone, and suppliers wouldn't deliver without payment. She needed cash, needed customers, needed to pretend she still had a business. 3 women came in within the first hour, Martha Doyle, Ruth Barrett, and Edith Reed. They arrived separately, but with the same purpose. The smell of their perfume mixed with the burlap and molasses scent of the store. They weren't there to buy. Martha picked up a bag of chicken scratch, set it down, picked up another. Her voice carried across the small space. Vera, honey, we've been worried about you. Vera was behind the counter, updating her account books. Real ones, not the feed ledger she kept for Ben. These showed the truth. Her store was failing. 2 more weeks and she'd be closing for good. No need to worry, Vera said, kept her eyes on the numbers. Well, but we do. Ruth moved closer. She was 50-something, wife of a dairy farmer, with opinions on everything. You've been spending an awful lot of time at the Ashford place. Someone has to feed his horses. For 2 months, Edith joined them at the counter. That's beyond Christian charity, dear. Well, people are starting to talk. Vera set down her pencil, looked at the 3 women, saw the concern on their faces, the judgment underneath it. Let them talk. Vera. Martha's voice went soft, dangerous soft. You're a widow. He's a single man. You're there at dawn. There at dusk. Folks see your wagon at his place all hours. Feeding horses takes time. You're throwing good money after bad, Ruth said. Everyone knows Ben Ashford is finished. That ranch is going to auction in 2 weeks. Curtis Brennan already has buyers lined up, and you're going to lose your store over it. Edith gestured at the half-empty shelves. Look at this place. You've got nothing left to sell. You've spent everything on feed you're giving away to a man who can't pay you back. The bell over the door jangled. 2 more women entered, stopped when they saw the group at the counter, started to leave. Stay, Martha called to them. We're just having a conversation about charitable limits. Vera's hands flattened on the counter. The wood was worn smooth from 4 years of transactions. Her husband had built this counter, had sanded it, stained it, made it level. She'd stood behind it through his death, through the hard winter after, through 3 years of barely breaking even. Ben Ashford is a good man who got sick at the wrong time, Vera said quietly. His horses needed feeding. I fed them, that's all. That's not all, Ruth leaned forward. You're a woman alone with a man, unchaperoned, for weeks. Your reputation is… My reputation, Vera interrupted. Survived my husband dying in a field and leaving me with nothing but debt. It survived pneumonia that nearly killed me. It'll survive this. But why? Martha's question came out frustrated, almost angry. Why risk everything for Ben Ashford? He's not family. He's barely even a friend. And he's going to lose that ranch, regardless of what you do. Vera picked up her pencil again, went back to her books. Because when I was drowning, people pulled me up. Now it's my turn to pull. If you ladies aren't buying anything, I have work to do. The women looked at each other. Some signal passed between them. They left in a cluster, voices low and sharp as they stepped into the February cold. The door closed behind them. The bell's jangle faded. Vera sat alone in her failing store and listened to the silence press against her ears. Through the window, mud showed dark between patches of old snow. The sound of dripping water came from the roof edge. February thaw. Spring coming, whether anyone was ready or not. She closed her account books, made a decision. The county courthouse sat at the center of town. Stone building, 2 stories, with records going back to 1856. Vera climbed the steps on February 20th, 5 days after the feed store conversation. The smell of old paper and ink filled the hallway inside. The clerk's office was on the 2nd floor. Young man named Peter Hayes behind the desk, maybe 25, with ink stains on his fingers and spectacles that kept sliding down his nose. Help you, Mrs. Hollis? I need to see a deed transfer. Ashford property, filed early January. Peter pulled out a massive ledger, ran his finger down entries. Here, January 7th. Benjamin Ashford to Thomas Ashford. Quitclaim deed. You want to see the document? Please. He disappeared into the back room, returned with a folder, set it on the counter between them. Inside, the deed lay flat and official. Vera's eyes went straight to the signature. Benjamin Ashford. Dated December 22nd, 1934. But something else caught her attention. The filing date, January 7th. And underneath, in smaller script, signed December 22nd, 1934, witnessed by Thomas Ashford. Vera pulled her own small notebook from her pocket, the one where she'd been tracking dates, Doc Ramsey's visits, Ben's conscious versus delirious periods. She'd asked Doc about it last week. He'd let her copy from his medical diary. Her finger found the entry, Dec 22, patient incoherent, fever 103 iron, spoke in fragments, unable to recognize family members. Then, Dec 28, fever broke briefly. Patient recognized Doc. Could speak 2 3-word sentences. Then, Jan 2, first full day of coherence. Patient tracking conversation. Memory still fragmentary for previous 2 weeks. Vera's finger stopped, moved back to the deed. December 22nd, the day Tommy had visited. The day the signature appeared on the quitclaim deed, but Doc's diary said Ben was incoherent that entire day, couldn't recognize people, couldn't form sentences, couldn't legally sign a document. Mr. Hayes, Vera said slowly, when a deed is signed by someone who's not in their right mind, is that legal? Peter pushed his spectacles up. Well, no ma'am. Contract law requires both parties be of sound mind and body. If someone was coerced or mentally incapacitated, the contract could be voided. Well, how would you prove that? Medical testimony, usually. Witness accounts. Something showing the person wasn't capable of understanding what they signed. Vera looked at her notebook, at Doc's careful entries, dates and times and descriptions of Ben's mental state. Not just December 22nd. Every day from December 20th through January 10th. A complete record. Her heart started beating faster. She pulled out her feed ledger, opened it to December 23rd. Her first entry, day 3, 12 horses, all healthy, fed 24 flakes hay, 12 measures grain. And underneath, in smaller writing she'd added later, been unconscious all day. Could not speak or recognize visitors. She'd been keeping dates too. Matching Doc's records without knowing it mattered. Every day, every feeding, every observation about Ben's condition. 2 separate records, both showing the same thing. Ben Ashford was not capable of signing any legal document on December 22nd, 1934. The signature was a forgery, and she could prove it. Mrs. Hollis? Peter was watching her. You all right? Vera closed her notebook, closed her ledger, Her hands were shaking. I need to borrow this deed, she said. Make a copy. I can't let original documents leave. Then I'll copy it here. Do you have paper? Peter brought paper and a pen. Vera copied every word of that deed, every date, every witness signature, the filing date, everything. When she finished, the afternoon light was slanting low through the courthouse windows. The smell of old stone and wood and truth filled her lungs. She had proof now, not just suspicion, not just anger, actual documented, dated proof that Tommy Ashford had forged his uncle's signature while Ben lay helpless with fever. February 28th was 8 days away, the foreclosure deadline. 8 days to get this evidence before a judge. To stop Curtis Brennan. To save 70 acres of Ashford land from auction. 8 days. Vera folded the copied deed carefully, put it in her pocket, next to her ledger, next to her notebook of dates. She walked down the courthouse steps into February twilight. The mud under her feet made sucking sounds. The air smelled like rain coming, like spring trying to arrive too early. Through town, lamplight glowed in windows, families at dinner, normal people living normal lives. Vera climbed into her wagon, turned toward the Ashford ranch. She had to tell Ben, had to show him what she'd found. For the first time in 61 days, she had something other than mercy to offer. She had hope. February 22nd, Ben was sitting on the porch when Vera arrived for evening feeding. He'd been there since noon, waiting. The sky was gray, heavy with weather that couldn't decide between rain and snow. The smell of wet earth rose from the yard where mud had replaced the last patches of winter white. Vera pulled her wagon to a stop. Saw him there. Something in his posture made her cautious. "You're up," she said, climbing down. "That's good." "Vera, we need to talk." She heard it in his voice. The formality, the distance, the sound of a decision made. She set down her feed bucket, didn't move toward the barn. "All right." Ben stood. His legs were stronger now. 2 months of recovery had given him back some of what pneumonia took. He could walk, could stand without shaking, could feed his own horses if he took it slow. "You need to stop coming here." The words dropped between them like stones. Vera's hands stilled. "The horses still need... I can feed them myself now." Ben gestured toward the barn. "Doc says I'm strong enough. Slow, but capable. You've done enough." "Enough," Vera repeated the word. Tasted it, found it bitter. "More than enough. 2 months. Every day. You've sacrificed your store, your time, your reputation." Ben's voice was steady, deliberate, like he'd practiced this. "I won't let you lose anything else on my account. You won't let me. This is my ranch, my problem, my nephew who..." He stopped. Couldn't finish. Vera took a step closer. "Your nephew who forged your signature while you were dying. Your bank manager who's stealing your land for railroad money. Your problem that's about to auction in 6 days." "Exactly. My problem, not yours." Ben's jaw was tight. "You've got a feed store to save, customers to serve, a life that doesn't involve watching a man lose everything he owns. Is that what you think I've been doing? Watching you lose?" "I know what you've been doing. Feeding horses you can't afford to feed, spending money you don't have, letting the whole town talk about you like you're..." He couldn't say it. The words the town was using. "Like, I'm what, Ben?" Vera's voice went quiet. Dangerous quiet. "Say it." He looked away, toward the barn, the fence line, anywhere but her face. "You know what they're saying. Martha Doyle, Ruth Barrett, half the town?" "I know exactly what they're saying. I was there when they said it." "Then you know why you need to stop coming, for your own good." "For my own good," Vera laughed, sharp and short. "You think I've been feeding your horses for 2 months and didn't know what it would cost?" The first drops of rain started, cold and sparse, the smell of it mixing with mud and distant wood smoke. Ben turned toward the door. "I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need protecting." "Everyone needs..." He stopped, turned back, saw her standing there in the rain. Small woman, not quite 5'4", with worn boots and work-calloused hands and eyes that had survived widowhood and pneumonia and a hard winter that nearly broke her. "You're right," she said. "Everyone needs protecting sometimes. And sometimes protecting means letting people help, even when it costs them, even when you can't pay them back." "I can't pay you back, Vera. I've got nothing. In 6 days, I won't even have this ranch." "I'm not asking to be paid back." Then what are you asking?" The rain picked up, steady now. The sound of it hitting the porch roof, the yard, the barn. Vera pulled something from her coat. 2 things. Her feed ledger and a folded paper. "I'm asking you to fight." Ben stared at the items in her hands. "Fight with what? $18? Good intentions?" Vera climbed the porch steps, set the ledger and paper on the rail between them. "Fight with this." She unfolded the paper. The copied deed. Ben recognized it immediately. The forged signature. The date. The filing information. "What is this?" "Proof." Vera opened her feed ledger, flipped to December 22nd. My record says you were unconscious that day. Unable to speak. I wrote it here. Been unconscious all day. Could not recognize visitors. She pulled out another notebook. Doc Ramsey's entries, copied in her careful script. Doc's diary says the same. Patient incoherent. Fever 103. Unable to recognize family members. Ben looked at the 3 documents. The forged deed. Vera's ledger. Doc's records. December 22nd, Vera said. The day Tommy had you sign. The day this deed claims you transferred your property. But 2 separate records say you weren't capable of signing anything. Ben's hand touched the deed. The signature that wasn't quite his. This proves Tommy forged it. This proves you weren't mentally competent when the signature was made. Contract law requires both parties be of sound mind. You weren't. The deed can be voided. For a moment, Ben couldn't speak, just stared at the evidence laid out before him. 2 months of Vera's daily mercy, documented and dated. Every entry matching Doc's medical records. Proof not just of Tommy's crime, but of Ben's innocence. How did you... I went to the courthouse 5 days ago. Compared the deed filing date with Doc's diary. The dates don't match. Tommy lied. Vera's finger traced the timeline. We have 8 days to get this before Judge Cartwright. Stop the foreclosure. Prove the deed transfer was fraudulent. Ben looked at her. Really looked. Saw the determination in her face. The fierceness. The absolute refusal to let him fall. You've been planning this, he said quietly. I've been keeping records. Planning came after. If we fight this, it'll get ugly. Curtis Brennan won't just walk away. Tommy will deny everything. They'll drag your name through. They're already dragging my name through the mud. Vera picked up the ledger, held it like a weapon. Difference is, now I've got proof. Not just of Tommy's forgery. Of your competence. Of your horses thriving. Of you recovering. 2 months of evidence that you're exactly who you've always been. A good man who got sick at the wrong time. The rain fell harder. The porch roof drummed with it. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled low and long. Ben reached for the documents. His hands shook. Not from weakness now. From something else. Something that felt like drowning and breathing at the same time. Why are you doing this? His voice cracked on the question. Vera met his eyes. Because when I needed pulling up, people pulled. Now it's my turn. It's not your turn. It's not your fight. Then whose fight is it, Ben? You're still too weak to stand in a courtroom for an hour. You can't argue law with Curtis Brennan. You can't present evidence to a judge. She stepped closer. Rain dripped from the porch edge between them. But I can. Doc can. We can stand for you until you're strong enough to stand yourself. And if we lose? Then we lose fighting. But we don't lose because we quit. Ben looked at the barn. His horses were inside, dry and fed. Vera's doing. 2 months of her showing up. 2 months of her refusing to let him fall alone. He picked up the copied deed, the forged signature mocking him from the page. Then he picked up Vera's ledger. 2 months of entries. Each one saying the same thing. You matter, your horses matter, your life matters. 6 days, he said. 6 days. Vera nodded. We file a motion Monday, request emergency hearing. Get Judge Cartwright to review the evidence before the foreclosure deadline. Curtis won't let this happen without a fight. Good. Vera's smile was fierce. I'm tired of being the only one fighting. Ben looked at her, standing there in the rain. Small woman with a feed ledger and determination that outweighed any doubt. He'd tried to push her away for her own good, for her protection. She'd refused, and somewhere in that refusal, something inside him broke open. Not grief this time, not rage, something else. Something that felt like hope, trying to remember how to exist. All right, he said. We fight. Vera held out her hand. Ben took it. Her palm was calloused from 2 months of pitchfork work. Her grip was strong. They stood there, hands clasped, while rain washed the February mud, and spring tried to arrive too early, and 6 days stretched out before them like a road with no promise of destination. But they'd walk it together. That was something. April 2nd. The sky broke clear and blue for the first time in weeks. Morning came, with the smell of wet earth and new grass trying to push through mud. 73 days since Ben Ashford collapsed in the snow. 41 days since Curtis Brennan accelerated the foreclosure. The hearing was set for 10 o'clock. Public venue. Courthouse steps, Judge Cartwright's orders. He'd said if this was about a man's competence and a town's judgment, then the town should witness. Ben dressed in his Sunday clothes. They hung loose now. 2 months of sickness had taken 20 pounds. He couldn't afford to lose. His hands shook as he buttoned his vest. Not from fever, from what was coming. Vera arrived at 8. She carried a leather case containing the documents, the forged deed, her feed ledger, Doc's medical diary entries. Copies of everything, prepared and organized like the bookkeeper she was. You ready? she asked. Ben looked at his hands, still shaking. No. Good. Neither am I. She held out her arm. Let's go anyway. They walked to the wagon together. The ranch looked different in April light, green showing through brown, mud instead of ice. The morning feed bell hanging on its post. Ben had rung it himself yesterday, first time since December 20th. The sound had carried across the valley, clear and true. The drive to town took 30 minutes. Neither of them spoke much. Just the sound of wagon wheels through mud and horses' hooves and meadowlarks singing from fence posts. Spring trying to announce itself, despite everything. The courthouse steps were already crowded when they arrived. Seemed like half the county had shown up. Martha Doyle, Ruth Barrett, Hiram Porter from the pawn shop, Peter Hayes, the county clerk, farmers and ranchers and townspeople who'd heard about the hearing and come to watch justice or entertainment. Sometimes those were the same thing. Curtis Brennan stood near the top of the steps. Dark suit, confident posture, Tommy beside him, looking younger than his 24 years, scared now that people were watching. Judge Cartwright sat at a makeshift table, 70 years old, white-haired, with eyes that had seen 50 years of frontier law. He banged his gavel once, the crowd quieted. This is an emergency hearing regarding property deed transfer and foreclosure of the Ashford Ranch. His voice carried without shouting. Benjamin Ashford claims the deed transfer was fraudulent. Curtis Brennan, representing First National Bank contests, will hear both sides. Ben stood at the base of the steps, Vera beside him. Doc Ramsey had arrived and stood with them. 3 against 2, truth against money. Judge Cartwright looked at Ben. Mr. Ashford, you're claiming you didn't sign the quitclaim deed transferring your property to your nephew. Ben climbed the first step. His legs held. That's correct, Your Honor. The deed bears your signature. It bears a forgery. Ben climbed another step. The crowd watched. Some had never seen him since the pneumonia. The weight loss shocked them, but his spine was straight. His voice clear. Curtis stepped forward. Your Honor, my client, Tommy Ashford, witnessed his uncle sign this deed on December 22nd. Mr. Benjamin Ashford was ill, yes, but conscious and aware. He was delirious, Vera said. She climbed the steps, stood beside Ben, opened her leather case. I have proof. Judge Cartwright gestured. Let's see it. Vera laid out the documents. First, the copied deed. December 22nd, 1934. The signature date. Then Doc's diary pages. Dr. Ramsey's medical records for that same day. Doc stepped forward, climbed the steps with the authority of a man who delivered half the county. Your Honor, I treated Ben Ashford from December 20th through February. On December 22nd, my notes show, patient incoherent, fever 103 degrees, unable to recognize family members or respond to questions. The crowd murmured. Judge Cartwright raised his hand for silence. A man in that condition, Doc continued, couldn't legally sign any document, couldn't understand what he was agreeing to. Curtis's expression tightened. Medical opinion aside, the signature exists. It was witnessed. By the man who benefited from it, Vera said. She pulled out her feed ledger, set it on the judge's table. I have additional evidence of Mr. Ashford's condition that day. Judge Cartwright opened the ledger. Read the first entry. December 23rd, day 3. Ben unconscious all day, could not recognize visitors. He flipped through pages. Entry after entry, 2 months of daily records, each one noting Ben's condition, each one documenting the care of 12 horses. Mrs. Hollis, the judge said, you kept these records? Yes, Your Honor. Every day from December 23rd through today, I fed Mr. Ashford's horses while he recovered. The ledger tracks feed costs and his daily condition. The judge read more entries. His finger stopped on February 1st, day 43, Ben able to sit up. First conversation lasting more than 5 minutes. Memory still fragmentary for December. This is consistent with Dr. Ramsey's records, Judge Cartwright said. He looked at Curtis. Your witness, Tommy Ashford. What do you say to this? Tommy's face had gone pale. He signed it. I was there. Look at the signature. Vera pointed to the deed. It slants left. The judge held the document up to the light. The signature was visible. Clear left slant. Mr. Ashford, the judge said. Are you right-handed or left-handed? Right-handed. Always have been. Ben pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, signed his name. The signature slanted distinctly right. Judge Cartwright compared the two, held them side by side. The difference was undeniable. 2 signatures. Same name, opposite slants. This signature, the judge said, pointing to the deed, was either forged entirely or guided by someone left-handed. Tommy took a step back. I was just trying to help. You were trying to steal, Ben said quietly. While I was dying. Curtis stepped forward. Your Honor, even if the signature is questionable, the foreclosure stands. The debt is still owed. The debt, Judge Cartwright said, is owed by Benjamin Ashford, not Tommy Ashford. The deed transfer is void. He picked up his gavel. Furthermore, I'm ordering an investigation into conspiracy between Mr. Curtis Brennan and Mr. Tommy Ashford regarding railroad land speculation. Curtis's face went white. You have no proof? I have a paper trail, Peter Hayes called from the crowd. Filed documents showing Curtis Brennan contacted railroad representatives in January about property acquisitions. The Ashford Ranch was specifically mentioned. The judge banged his gavel. The quitclaim deed dated December 22, 1934, is declared null and void. Property ownership returns to Benjamin Ashford. Foreclosure is dismissed pending review of the original loan terms. Another gavel strike. Tommy Ashford, you're under arrest for forgery and fraud. Sheriff, take him. The sheriff moved through the crowd. Tommy tried to run, made it 3 steps before hands caught him, pulled him back. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut carried across the courthouse steps. Curtis turned to leave. Judge Cartwright's voice stopped him. Mr. Brennan, you're dismissed from First National Bank effective immediately. The State Banking Commission will review your conduct. Curtis stood frozen, then his shoulders sagged. He walked down the steps. The crowd parted. Nobody met his eyes. Judge Cartwright stood, looked at Ben and Vera. Mr. Ashford, your ranch is yours. Mrs. Hollis, your ledger is the finest piece of evidence I've seen in 30 years on the bench. Mercy keeping better records than malice. The gavel struck one final time. The crowd erupted. Not in scandal, in something else, relief maybe, justice witnessed, proof that truth could still win, when backed by documents and dates, and 2 months of daily mercy documented in a feed store ledger. Ben stood on the courthouse steps, Vera beside him, Doc behind them. The morning sun warm on their faces, the smell of spring mud and new grass and hope that had been earned, not given. April 2nd, 1935. The day 70 acres of Ashford land stayed Ashford land. The day mercy became evidence. Tommy was taken to the county jail in handcuffs. The crowd watched him go. Some looked satisfied, others just looked sad. Watching a young man throw away his future for $500 and railroad speculation money he'd never see. Curtis Brennan left in his Packard, drove away without looking back. By afternoon, the bank board would accept his resignation. By evening, his name would be mud in 3 counties, some mistakes you don't come back from. The crowd dispersed slowly. People approached Ben and Vera with handshakes and quiet words. Martha Doyle came last. She took Vera's hands in hers. I was wrong about you, Martha said. About what you were doing out there? Vera met her eyes. You were worried. That's not wrong. I was judging, that is. Martha squeezed her hands. What you did, 2 months of feeding his horses, keeping those records, that's what church talks about on Sundays. You actually did it. She left before Vera could respond. Ruth Barrett nodded as she passed. Edith Reed touched Vera's shoulder. No words, just acknowledgement. Doc Ramsey walked with Ben and Vera to their wagon. You'll need another month before you're full strength, he told Ben. No heavy work yet, but you're past the worst. Thanks to Vera. Thanks to both of you. Doc looked at them. What you did, keeping those records, trusting each other through this, that's rarer than you think. Don't waste it. He left them there in the April sunshine. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Vera drove. Ben sat beside her, feeling the weight of 73 days lift. The foreclosure was dismissed. The ranch was his. Tommy would face trial. Curtis was finished. But none of that was what filled his chest right now. What filled him was the woman beside him, the feed store widow who'd shown up 73 mornings in a row and asked for nothing except the chance to help. They pulled into the ranch yard. The barn stood solid in afternoon light. The horses lifted their heads from grazing. The mud was drying to dust in places. Green grass showed everywhere now. Real spring, not false promise. Ben climbed down from the wagon, walked to the barn, to the post where the morning feed bell hung. He gripped the rope, pulled. The bell rang clear and bright across the valley. The sound carried over mud and new grass and 70 acres of Ashford land that would stay Ashford land. The horses lifted their heads, recognized the sound, came toward the barn. Vera stood watching. Saw Ben ring the bell a second time, saw his shoulders straighten, saw him become himself again. When he turned back to her, she was holding something. His father's pocket watch, gold case catching the light. I went to Porter's Pond 3 weeks ago, Vera said. Paid the $30 to buy it outright. Figured you'd want it back. Ben took the watch, felt the familiar weight, opened the case. The second hand swept smooth and steady. To John Ashford, time well spent. His throat closed. $30. Good investment. Vera pulled out her feed ledger, opened to the last page. The final entry read, April 2nd, 1935, day 103, total feed cost $346.08. Balance, paid, in full. Below that, in fresh ink with gratitude. B.A. When did you... Ben started. This morning, while you were dressing. Vera closed the ledger. Accounts settled, debts clear. We're square. We're not square. Ben slipped the watch into his vest pocket, right where it belonged. We'll never be square. What you did... What we did, Vera corrected. You fought. I stood with you. That's how it works. Ben looked at the ranch, the barn, the house. The 70 acres his grandfather had claimed in 1867, his father had built. He'd nearly lost to fever and forgery in February deadlines. I want you to be co-owner, he said. Not hired help, not charity case I'm repaying. Equal partner in this ranch. Vera went still. Ben, you saved it as much as I did. Your records, your testimony, your refusal to let me quit. He met her eyes. This ranch survives because you showed up. That earns partnership, if you want it. The horses were at the barn now, waiting for evening feed even though the bell had rung off schedule. Habits formed over 73 days didn't break easy. Vera looked at Ben, saw the steadiness in him, the strength that had nothing to do with muscles and everything to do with being seen and choosing not to hide. Partnership, she said, testing the word. If you'll have a stubborn fool who needed pneumonia to see what was right in front of him, Vera smiled. Small at first, then wider, she walked to the bell post, gripped the rope, rang it twice. The sound echoed across the valley. Then we better feed these horses, she said. Partners split the work. They walked to the barn together. Ben carried hay. Vera measured grain. The horses ate with the contentment of animals who knew they were safe, who knew the bell would ring tomorrow and the day after, and all the days that spring would bring. Outside, the sun dropped toward the western ridge. The smell of grass and mud and possibility filled the April air. On the porch rail, 2 coffee cups sat waiting. One was Vera's. She'd left it there this morning. The other was Ben's. 2 cups, 2 people. One ranch saved by mercy that kept better records than malice. The morning bell hung quiet now, but tomorrow it would ring at dawn, and the day after, and all the mornings that stretched ahead like a road with no end in sight. Just the sound of it carrying across the valley, clear and true, proof that some things survive winter, and some things are worth every day it takes to save them. Folks around here still talk about that winter, not because a man got sick, that happens, not because a bank tried to steal a ranch, that happens too. They talk about it because of what didn't happen. A woman didn't walk past a dying man, didn't count the cost before helping, didn't quit when the town talked, or the feed bill climbed, or the fight looked lost. And a man didn't die alone, didn't lose his land to forgery, didn't let pride kill him when mercy offered a hand. The Ashford Ranch runs different now. 2 names on the deed, 2 people at the morning bell. Turns out 70 acres is easier to work when you're not carrying it alone. Vera's feed store reopened in May. Her customers came back. Some apologized. Most just started buying again, like nothing happened. That's how small towns work. Memory's short when it's convenient, long when it matters. Ben keeps his father's watch in his vest pocket. Wins it every morning, says time's too valuable to waste on being stubborn. Vera keeps her ledger in the house now, not for tracking debt. Just to remember that mercy counts for something, that showing up matters. That the smallest acts, feeding horses, keeping records, refusing to quit, can tip the balance when everything hangs by a thread. April turned to May, May to June. The grass grew tall, the horses got fat, spring arrived like it always does. Indifferent to whether humans are ready, but some springs change you. Some winters teach you what you're made of. And some people show up at dawn for 103 days straight, just because it needs doing. The ranch survived. So did they. Not despite the winter, but because of what the winter revealed, what they became when everything else got stripped away. That's worth more than any deed, more than any ledger balance. That's the kind of wealth that survives.